Ruh-roh, it's Spooky Drama Friday on a Halloween, oh no! Because one of the teams that won Ascension in EMEA maybe shouldn't have been allowed to play in the tournament? Let's dive into it. So, for those of you who don't know the story, this is the team BBL Pacific. Here they are, lifting the Ascension trophy, because they were one of the two teams to win Ascension in EMEA, and therefore will go and play in Tier 1 in EMEA next year. There they go, lifting the trophy, nice and happy, right? So, they won Ascension, all is fine, and now they'll go and play in Tier 1. But there are some questions about whether this actually should have been allowed. Now, these questions arise because the team that won Ascension there is called BBL Pacific. Now, this is the BBL that is currently in Tier 1 EMEA already. And you can see the Pacific here. They used to be Pacific Esports, which is just a regular Turkish Challengers Tier 2 team. They then signed an affiliate agreement with BBL. Now, there are other teams in the leagues that also have affiliate agreement with other teams, like Giant X have an affiliate agreement with a team called UCAM in Spain, and that is perfectly reasonable. But there are also academy teams, and we are going to dive into the minutiae of this and why it matters for this specific example of whether this team was actually an affiliate team or really secretly an academy team. So that is the main question, and the reason that these questions started to bubble up about whether this really was an affiliate team or not was due to this little interview quote here from WTCN, who's one of the founders of BBL, who said BBL Pacific is a team entirely owned by BBL. The players of BBL and BBL Pacific are also under contract with us. We hold the transfer rights for all of them. I think BBL Pacific is one of our biggest investments. It might be our smartest move because we brought in players who are tightly knit. You might get from that quote that it sounds like that is more just like a BBL enterprise that Pacific's name has kind of been tagged onto as well, and maybe feels a bit more like an academy team. Now, when this quote was brought up on Planchat, Mini was kind of suggesting that either this was a mistranslation or, this wasn't strictly true potentially. And I have no reason to doubt that that is what Mini truthfully believed, because I don't know why he would lie about that. But then this happened, where the main BBL team are going to sign the entire BBL Pacific team. So that team that ascended is now just on BBL, and that's just the BBL roster now. And now Pacific, who allegedly now are, completely separate from BBL, they now need to find a completely new team. Now we can go through this tweet here from Aras, I'm not even gonna try, who I don't really know who this person is, I'll be honest. I don't know. It says Galatasaray at the bottom. Do they work for Galatasaray, who do have an esports division? Are they just a Galatasaray fan? I have no idea. For those asking the why question, the answer is actually hidden in this tweet that was posted and then deleted. This sentence was the tweet that I just showed about them owning the team. This sentence was actually one that WTCN shouldn't have uttered live, in my opinion, because it's clear that it's a situation that erases the distinction between affiliate and academy teams. Academy teams like Koi Phoenix or KC Blue Stars are fully owned by their parent organizations and have no right to qualify for VCT EMEA. Teams like Fenerbahce or UCAM, on the other hand, are partners of FUT or Giants. They collaborate, but there's no joint ownership situation. If they win Ascension, they can enter VCT MEA, but those partnerships end. That's a good explainer of what's going on here, right? The problem with BBL and Pacific is this too. It looks like an affiliate, but when you look at the explanations, it's positioned as an academy team. The real issue is that the relationship between BBL and Pacific hasn't been explained to us correctly from the very beginning, because if we'd known about this statement from WTCN from the start, we'd have told everyone as long as Pacific is fully owned by BBL, it can't play in VCT EMEA. In a scenario where BBL's support is pulled, I didn't believe Pacific could pass Riot's internal evaluation to become a partner if they couldn't somehow secure incredibly big sponsors within a month. Thought they'd end up like the Guard. As for Pacific roster moving to BBL, anyone saying they expected something else is lying, in my opinion. But this year too, while everyone was frantically trying out rosters, they didn't even make a single transfer move up to now until Ascension ends. Even if they didn't win Ascension, I thought they'd fully transition to the main roster actually, which does actually make sense. Things have been pretty quiet on the BBL front in terms of who they were actually going to pick up, mainly because probably no matter what happened in Ascension, they were always going to pick up the BBL Pacific team. And so that is the main crux of the problem, right? Is this team an affiliate team and therefore completely fine to play in Ascension as long as that affiliation ends if they win it? Or were they always just an academy team if BBL owned all of the rights to the contracts of the players? So there's a couple things that we need to discuss and problems that we need to get into. I think first let's start with just one of the sentences in that tweet, which is this one, which In the scenario where BBL support is pulled, I didn't believe Pacific could pass Riot's internal evaluation to becoming a partner. So, for those of you who don't know, and I'm pretty sure that Riot does the kind of tests for the teams about whether they're, you know, in a fit and proper state to actually play in Tier 1. They do that before Ascension. The question here is, BBL Pacific seem to pass those tests, but would have Pacific just on their own pass those tests without BBL, you know, maybe giving them financial or whatever else support? I don't know, right? Riot will probably know, but I don't know. And that is one question that needs to be asked. A crucial point to this all, I think, is actually the player comeback. The reason that I think comeback is kind of somewhat crucial to this is because comeback went from Pacific to BBL Pacific to then Gentle Mates midway through last year, right? And I don't know if Gentle Mates paid a buyout for comeback, or, you know, I don't know whether they did or not, but I'm sure Riot does. And if Gentle Mates did, it might be a bit interesting to, you know, wonder, well, where did that money go, right? Did it go only to BBL? Did it go only to Pacific? Did it go to a split of them? And that might somewhat give you a bit of an answer as to what the true dynamic here was, right? Because if that money, if there was a buyout paid for comeback by Gentle Mates and it all went to BBL, then I think you can really start to, like, question whether this is just an academy team, you know, apart from, you know, we put quotation marks around it and we say it's an affiliate team instead. Now, it should also be mentioned that Pacific themselves have said that they're still going to ascend, you know, they're just going to look for 5 new players and still play. Now, an important point is, and I know a lot of people have talked about this, or like, you know, should you be able to ascend if none of your players are there on the team that actually got you into Tier 1? You should know that, you know, let's take Envy as an example. Let's say all of their players were old enough to go to Tier 1, you know, and maybe other orgs were just willing to pay more for their players, right? Maybe Sentinels were like, yeah, well, we're going to pay more than Envy can for Kane and Poppin, right? And maybe, you know, NRG are like, we need a controller, so we'll take Ion. And you know, 100 Thieves are like, well, we'll take Inspire back because it's funny. And then, you know, Cloud9 are like, well, we'll take Extra. Actually, no, we won't take Extra because we don't know who he is. So we won't take him. And then EG are like, well, we'll take Extra. And then it's actually like, well, we're EG, so we actually can't pay you anything. And then till Fury are like, fine, we'll do it because now we're a North American team or whatever, right? In that scenario, you wouldn't want to punish Envy necessarily if all of their players just left because they couldn't pay them enough money, right? So if you deem this that, you know, Pacific are innocent in this, little old innocent Pacific, then they shouldn't be punished just because their players left, right? That isn't necessarily the reason you should punish an org. However, as we've kind of already mentioned, that might not really be the case in this scenario. Now, the funny thing is, though, if you do believe, you know, that this is shady and shouldn't have been allowed, and BBL Pacific shouldn't have even been allowed to play in EMEA Ascension, well, funnily enough, because of the way that the EMEA Ascension worked, where they just had straight semifinals, a straight shootout to qualify, if they were going to, Riot, you know, say that, oh, this team actually shouldn't have been allowed to ascend, well, then there wouldn't be a clear kind of like who should go in next, because you can't just promote Dynasty instead of Mandatory, because that's just unfair, you know, because it's based on who you played against. So they would actually have to do another best of 5, which would be funny. So overall, what do I think will happen? Unfortunately, for those of you who want to feel outraged, I don't think anything will happen, to be honest. I think Pacific will just ascend, and they can literally start their roster with the 2 Turkish players who were on BBL before anyway in Sociable 11, and that's a great starting point. And actually, I was thinking about it. You could make a pretty good Tier 1 roster from recycled Turkish players from last year who aren't even on a team as far as I'm aware right now. You could go Levin, Sociable, Elite, CNET, Atta Captain as far as I'm aware, and make a fairly decent roster straight away from that. You know, without even having to look in the Tier 2 Turkish farm, which is so bountiful and plentiful anyway. Should this have been allowed to happen? Maybe not. Maybe not. I do think there are questions to be asked about if you own all of the contracts for the players, at what point is that just an academy team? I think it's borderline. I think it's verging on the edge, but I don't suspect anything will happen because it's too late and it's hassle and people will forget.